And of course, in order to capture these values of the properties more accurately and validly, you will need to choose the right scaling techniques, right? How to do the scaling, right? How to do the measurement, right? You can actually ask the respondents to compare when they measure that something. For instance, in order to measure the performance or the preference, you ask them to compare the objects, right? Or sometimes you don't ask them to compare, just ask them to carry out the measurement based on that particular object or based on that particular situation, right? So that kind of technique is called a non-scaling technique, non-comparative technique, sorry, right? So for this comparative technique, you can use, this is what we call the paired comparison by comparing two objects at a time and carry out the measurement, right? Followed by like rank order, constant sum, QSort, and other techniques, right? Whereas a non-comparative technique, you can have this continuous rating scale or itemized rating scale. So it is very common that we use this itemized rating scale and then ask the respondents to tick or click on the click button in the online questionnaire, right? So you tend to ask them to tell you the level of agreement with that something, right? Using Likert scale, or you can use a semantic differential and a stepper scale, right? So let us look at them one by one in more detail, right? Okay. So in this paired comparison, for instance, you ask them to compare these five objects A, B, C, D to show their preference. And of course, you give them the instructions. For each pair, please indicate which one of these two types of handphones, for instance, you prefer to use, right? So if you prefer the column, right, let's say you write one in a particular box, means that the brand in that column is preferred over the type in the corresponding row. So if you prefer A, for instance, you prefer A to B, so you will write one in that box, right? And if you prefer A to C, then you write one in that particular box. But if you prefer D to A, then you write 0 here, right? So you can see with this kind of paired comparison, comparing 2 by 2, and with certain instruction, you as a researcher will know later on, out of all these objects, which one is the most preferred, right? By just adding up all the scores of 1 here. So that is a very interesting and can be very accurate way of measuring preference by asking the respondent to compare 2 by 2. Later on, sum up the scores, right? And you can see which one is the most preferred. Or you can ask them to compare a few at a time and rank order the preference, like in this case. So if you have 7 brands here, which one you prefer the most? And then ask them to put 1 for the highly preferred, the most preferred, second 2 for second most preferred, and so on and so forth. So from there, this rank order measurement can tell you the preference. Or you can ask them to distribute this a sum of points. In this case, let's say 100 points across a few objects. And from there also you can know the relative importance or the relative seriousness or the relative effectiveness or the relative performance and so on, depending on your instructions, depending on what you want them to assess, right? So in this case, you can see to distribute 100 points across these attributes of the soap, mildness, how many points, and then price, how many points, and so on, right? So it's up to the respondents to distribute across these objects using these 100 points. But of course, you have to ensure that these points will be total up to 100, right? So this is helping us to know the relative importance in relations to these few objects shown here. Okay. So that is very interesting and useful. Later on, please apply this in your questionnaire design, right? For all these dimensions, for example, please indicate the level of importance by distributing 100 points across these numerous dimensions, right? So these are what we call the comparative technique. Huh? And another one is QSort, right? QSort is able to help the researcher to know the answer for more objects, right? Across more objects, you ask them to sort according to certain instruction. So in QSort, more objects will be provided and ask the respondents to sort to categorize them within certain category. Of course, you as a researcher, we tell them the instruction. For example, you may have 100 keywords, right? And out of these 100 keywords, please sort them by in terms of their category, right? Let's say this field will be in this category, this field will be in this category, this field will be in this category. So categorization of the keywords, categorization or sorting of the objects and so on. In this case, will be the words, like what you're going to do in the qualitative research, right? So this sorting of all these objects into various categories meaningfully, right, are actually we need your comparative skills. You need to compare them, right? Whether they are similar or not, then they will be in one category, right? So whether they are important or not, then as again you will, if you sort by importance, right? So this sorting of many objects into various categories is a kind of Q-sort technique. And of course, sometimes you don't ask them to compare. That's why we have this non-comparative technique like a scale, right? You may have a list of items, especially in your structured questionnaire, to measure that particular independent variable or dependent variable or moderating variable. You have list of items like what you have learned just now in ODT, right? So all those items in the ODT will be used, right, to measure. And then the scaling technique is like a scale. Tell them to indicate the level of agreement with each and every one of the statement, right, in the questionnaire. For instance, you can arrange them nicely like this. All the items on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, you can have, let's say, a list of items here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all these uh, numerical scaling, the scales will be arranged nicely here so that they can tick or they can circle the relevant number. So 1 indicates strongly disagree, 2, let's say, disagree, 3 is neither agree nor disagree, 4 is agree, 5 is strongly agree. Sometimes, sometimes we can have 7 categories, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So to be more accurate, because you find that certain statistical analysis technique requires you to have a more accurate assessment or scaling to be done, right? And if that is if it is necessary, you will use the more categories kind of scale. That is, let's say in this case, a 7-point like a scale, or it can be even 9-point like a scale, right? The one that you are seeing here is a 5-point like a scale, right? Or you can use this semantic differential, whereby you have lists of bipolar of words being used to describe the variable which you will like the respondents to measure. And of course, between these antonyms here, you have, let's say, 7 spaces here. So then we carry out the assessment. If they think that they are a very rugged person, then the person will put a cross near to rugged, right? So you can see all these lists of antonyms here actually are used to describe this variable called the self concept, right? So you really need the literature to help you. What are the words to be used? Or use the qualitative research to help you. What are the words to be used? Of course, once you have the list of words, you need to find the respective antonyms, the opposite meaning, right? For example, let's say you want to measure, in this case, self-concept, all these 12 words will be used, right? Based on the literature, based on the book, or based on the journal article, right? And of course, you may have extra words based on your qualitative research. And you have to find the respective opposite meaning. Okay? Or you can use a stepper scale named after Professor Stepper, P-E-L, not P-L-E. There is a different meaning already. So this is Professor Stepper. He suggested these are positive and negative numbers, right, to show uh, the level of agreement with this adjective. Normally it's an adjective or a noun, right, in the middle. There is no 0 point, so you can see the 0 point is replaced by an adjective, like in this case, quality graduate, quality research, beautiful campus, and could be highly recognized, and so on. So these are the phrases or keywords to describe the quality of the university. So you have all these lists of keywords or phrases as the middle point of this continuum of numbers. So if the respondent is very agree with that noun or adjective, that respondent will circle, let's say, +5. If it is really extremely disagree with that, let's say, phrase here, that respondent will circle -5, right? So you can see that within this continuum of positive and negative numbers, the respondents can express their level of agreement as well, all right, towards that particular noun or phrases or that particular adjective. So if you have list of these adjectives with these scales, you can really carry out a very good assessment of that particular university in a very interesting manner, and can be a very user-friendly manner, because it's easier to just circle this and then can also express whether negative or positive how to say evaluation towards that particular thing. So please think of all these interesting scaling technique, right, when you design your questionnaire, right? So all these lists of keywords or adjectives uh, will be will be obtained from the related journal article or book or your qualitative research, because these are already developed in your ODT. Remember, all of us now are working on the ODT, the operational definition table. Okay. Or you will use this graphical scale for certain type of respondents, like less educated respondents, or sometimes the kids and so on. You may use certain graphical scale, right, interestingly, to later on let them answer your question, right? It can be your overall question or sometimes very specific questions. So you can use like a thermometer here, or you can use sometimes sunshine, you can use moon, you can use facial expression, right? The smiling face, sad face, and so on, right? All these are very useful, right? To indicate the level of, let's say, happiness, level of, let's say, your feeling, right? And also can be the performance, right? And can be confidence, right? And all this can be used, right, with relevant instruction, right? Right. So that is a graphical